Jane Thompson called me about maybe 3 months ago, and she said, I want to speak to the group because this group is important to my story. So we're really excited to have her here tonight.
So I was telling Janie when I interview near-death experiencers, I have a set of kind of standard questions. So my first question is, Janie, tell us who you were prior to your near-death experience.
Prior to my near-death experience, well, I was 34 when I had my NDE. So I'd had a little bit of, life as an adult, and I was a real estate agent, and I wasn't married. I had a boyfriend, but I was really about work and business and sales um I loved to hang out with my friends. We did happy hours a lot, and I was really in ego a lot. I would say I was more focused on the external than a lot of what was going on internally. But I was just kind of coasting through life. But I was mostly, if I had to really say, to sum up who I was a business person, and that was what made me tick and what I was all about.
Okay, yeah, that paints a pretty clear picture. And so then what were the circumstances, as kind of concisely, what were the circumstances that led up to your NDE?
So my NDE was August 22nd, 2008. And the night before, I hadn't been feeling very well. But I woke up really early the next morning. I don't know exactly what time it was, but the sun was starting to come up and I was burning up. I had a terribly high fever, which I later found out was 106 degrees. And I was in horrific pain. It was the same type of all over body aches that you get with the flu, but much worse than that, to the point where I couldn't really even move. And so I was slipping in and out of consciousness in bed. And then I was finally able to reach for the phone to call a family member, and she came and got me and took me to the hospital. And that was at about 7:30 that morning. And they were trying to diagnose and figure out what was going on. And we eventually found out that I had a kidney stone that was lodged in my ureter. So everything that the kidney usually filters out was going back into my bloodstream, and I had a severe infection, and I had gone into septic shock, and my internal organs were starting to fail. So I was really, really sick. And my NDE happened in the hospital that day at 1:20 p.m.
Mm-hmm. So what happened then, and tell us in detail about your NDE.
Okay. So I was in excruciating pain, and I could feel myself coming and going a little bit throughout that later in that morning. I could feel myself kind of moving out of my body, and then I'd drift back in.
Mm.
And I went in for a CAT scan, and they hadn't done an IV at that point because they didn't know what was going on. But I was really starting to slip out of my body. And every time the nurse would try to put the needle in for the IV, she had to try several times because I was so dehydrated at that point.
Yeah.
It would almost zap me back into my body. And I remember being so mad. And I yelled at her a little bit. I said, either just get it in or forget it, because I just wanted to float out. But she eventually got the IV in. I did the CAT scan, came out, and I was in the emergency room in a little area waiting for the doctor to come and say what was next. And by this time I was hooked up to machines and everything. And everything around me got really amplified. I remember, the lights in the hospital are a little bright. The fluorescent lights are a little obnoxious anyway, but they really felt bright. It felt intrusive, the sensory input from those lights. And there was a clock on the wall, and I could hear the clock ticking, but it was like a pounding in my ears. And I started to convulse. And at that moment, I closed my eyes and I went very internal. I completely disconnected from the external world. And I did this, I started looking around the inside of my body. It was, I don't know if you ever remember watching in health class in high school where they show the internal organs and the blood pumping, almost like a cartoon. And I just started looking around the inside of my body with no judgment, just checking it out. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm dying. This is what it feels like to die. And I dismissed that for a little while as I just kept looking around, but then it really hit me. I said, "Oh, I'm really dying. This is what it feels like to die." And right at that moment, I just popped out of my body and I was up on the ceiling of the hospital room that I was in, looking down at myself. And I wasn't sure what was going on for a moment because I felt myself up on the ceiling, but I saw myself down on the gurney. But also, when I was looking at myself, I could see that there was no life in my body. All life was gone. I could tell I was just the shell of me lying there. And it didn't scare me. It was just felt like an observation. And so I was just looking around. I was looking at the people that were around me, and it was almost like I was watching a movie, is what it felt like.
Mm.
And at that moment, I started very slowly floating up backwards, where I was still looking down at the room. And it was very peaceful. It was very gentle. And I was eventually looking at the top of the hospital, but I didn't see the building itself. But somehow I knew that that was the hospital. And I saw um, these little white buzzing balls just buzzing all around and floating all around. And I didn't know what that was at the time, but I've put it together now. And those were souls that I was looking at because they were all connected by this really thin, iridescent line. And the line looks exactly like if you saw a spider web in the sunlight, if it caught the sun just right. And I saw how everybody was connected, how we aren't these little individual souls, we're all connected. And I felt it made me happy to see that. I felt peaceful about it, but it made me feel like, oh, it just made sense to me and it felt right to me. And I kept floating backwards and everything started getting smaller and smaller. And then the next thing I knew, it is maybe I was out in space. Everything felt dark and I wasn't really looking at anything anymore. And then I immediately felt myself go into the tunnel and it was very black, very dark. I couldn't see anything, but it wasn't scary at all. And I was traveling very fast through the tunnel. It was exhilarating. It was like going on a fast roller coaster ride that was fun, or, a fast car ride. I felt safe and it felt fun and it felt good. But that was very quick. And then the next thing I knew, I kind of plopped out of the tunnel, is what it felt like. And I was surrounded instantly by white light. And it felt a little bright at first, but not in an uncomfortable way. And I was just orienting to it and kind of trying to figure out where I was at that point. And as soon as I started to maybe acclimate to the light, I started to feel the love. That was the very first thing that I felt, was the unconditional love. And it was love that I've never felt before. And even now, I'm a mom, so I can love big, but this light, the kind of love that I felt from that light, is nothing compared to um, anything that I've experienced here on earth. And so I was just soaking it up. It just felt so good. And then I started to feel peace, just complete peacefulness, and that knowing that everything is fine, that all is well, everything started making sense. And then I started feeling healing. And I felt like when I went into that white light that I had wounds or maybe even holes in my energy or in my soul and pain. And I felt this white light just filling all of that in and repairing all of it and really just pouring love on all of it. And that felt wonderful. It felt like becoming whole again and just soaking it up. I couldn't even believe what was happening. It was so amazing and so wonderful. And so I was just soaking it up. And then I started to feel what I've kind of described as a crowd starting to come close to me, a friendly crowd. And I think now that it was loved ones or my team of angels or guides starting to come in close to me. But before I could figure out what that was all about, I heard that voice, that inaudible voice say, "You have to go back." And I went, "No way." That was the last thing I wanted to hear at that point. And I remember protesting, and I said, "No, no, you can't make me go back. Please don't make me go back." And then again, it was in a loving way, but very matter of fact, "You have to go back." And I protested again. And then before I knew it, I was back in the tunnel. And then I came back into my body through the top of my head. It was almost like I got sucked back into my body, is what it felt like. And then I felt the pain for a split second. And then I was just out. It was just blackout at that point. And I don't remember anything until much, much later that evening when I was in pre-op. And during surgery, I had a very brief OBE, an out of body experience, where I could see what the doctors were doing, but it lasted a split second. I think I was maybe trying to get out again, but it just wasn't my time.
Wow. And you said when you were in the light and these like wounds and holes sort of were being healed and filled, these were like psychological wounds or like from kind of psychological or psychospiritual injuries from your life?
Everything. It felt like it was everything. Even physical injury, the
Hmm.
trauma from that I was storing energetically. And it was, you know, childhood wounds and trauma and psychological and spiritual. It was just anything that I had experienced that was painful or hurtful or damaging. It was just being repaired.
Hmm. Wow. Wow. Um, and it's interesting, you said the voice that was inaudible. So that's really interesting that you didn't actually hear it, but you somehow knew it or something. Uh,
Yeah, it's interesting because it had characteristics to it.
uh-huh.
Like I would say it sounded like more of a male voice than a female voice. And the voice had an energy to it. It was that white light, but it was, I think I don't think it was an actual voice that I heard. I think
Mhm.
that's just maybe, almost a message or a knowingness. And now here I am in my own human way, and that's how it's translated over.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I wonder if I had stayed, if it would have been a voice. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay. Well, before we go on to talk about after effects, does anyone have any questions about Janie's near-death experience itself? Anything that didn't come up clear? I see one question. Do you feel as if the energies coming toward you was a welcome team of sorts? And were they familiar or no? The crowd that was coming towards you, did it feel like sort of a welcome team? And were they familiar to you or not at the time?
It definitely felt like a welcome team or a welcome committee. It was a feeling of they were excited to see me. Um, and I was still trying to figure it all out. So I felt comfortable with them. They did feel like they were there to help me. I I'm not for sure who all it was because it just happened so quickly and then it was time for me to go.
Mhm.
But it was a good feeling. I wish I would have had more of a chance to see who that was, if it was family members. I suspect it was family members who have passed over, and
Mhm.
my guides and everyone who helps me right now. I think it was all of them. So yeah, it did definitely feel like a welcoming team.
Great. Okay. And I don't see any other questions. So then, um, what happened afterwards, and what changes? I know you experienced changes in yourself, and what of those do you attribute directly from the near death experience, as opposed to, it's enough to just come close to death and survive and all that, but what changes do you attribute specifically to the NDE?
So um the next morning when I woke up in the hospital, I I was still very sick. That's a long recovery from septic shock. Um, at the same time as I was still very clear, even though I was on all of these medications and my body was still very sick, I still had a clarity to me. And I immediately started having psychic experiences where the people that were coming into my room or the little area that I was in, I just kind of knew their stories or knew what they were thinking. And I started having mediumship experiences right away where I could feel people that had passed just walking through the room. And most of the time, the way it started is if I would have my eyes closed and I'd feel somebody. So I'd open my eyes to see who it was, and it was no one. And that started happening immediately. But I blamed it on the pain medications that I was on. Because it did feel kind of trippy, I would say, because I'd never experienced anything like that before in my life. So for the first few months after my NDE, I just thought that I was on heavy doses of Dilaudid, which is a big time painkiller. And I just thought, wow, this Dilaudid has some strange side effects here. And so I was just thinking as soon as I was feeling better, all of that would not exist anymore. But as soon as I got off of the pain medications, what I found was those experiences started becoming more frequent and clearer
Mm.
because I wasn't clouded up by the medication. And
Mhm.
so that's when I really started paying attention to the way that my life had changed and what was going on. And so psychic experiences, just knowing things that I would have no way of knowing. Um, I felt people's intentions a lot early on, and mediumship experiences. And then once I was feeling better and I started going out into the world, that's when I started feeling all of the after effects of being an empath. And it was just loud and clear. I could feel other people's moods. And sometimes I would feel elevated because of their moods. And other times it could really bring me down, and really, it could be very exhausting. And so that was the other big one that is definitely because of my NDE. I had nothing like that happening before. And then I had other things happening too that it took me a while to figure out that it was related to my NDE. And it was actually because about a year after my NDE, I found the IANDS website where there's the list of after effects. And I could just kind of check the box next to every list. And I didn't realize that the reason my watches had stopped working was because of my NDE. So that's an after effect. And then I couldn't get doors to open, the automatic doors that have sensors. And I realized, well, that's because of my NDE. I just thought, I don't know what I thought, to be honest with you. Um, and so all of that has evolved. It all was very raw and very big in the beginning, and I didn't understand it. And the more I researched and talked to people who really understand NDEs, and talked to other NDEers that had similar after effects, that's when I really learned how to put some form to it, and to understand it more. And that's when I started, just kind of naturally started being able to do healing work. And so that was the next big phase that I went through with the after effects, is realizing that I could use everything that had happened to help people and to move energy and to help with healing. And so the healer phase, that was the next big one. And now I feel like some of the things are changing. Doors notice me now
Oh,
for the most part. I'd say 7 times out of 10, automatic doors recognize me. And it makes me sad a little bit, because I've heard that I might be kind of calibrating back to the physical world a little bit. Um, I don't think I can wear watches. I got frustrated with that, so I haven't tried for a couple of years. Um, but the more healing work that I do, because I revisit that white light so frequently while I'm working, or just when I want to go revisit it, which is all the time. Because of that, I've noticed some of the other after effects are getting sharper and more refined as time goes on, but it's constantly changing and taking new shape.
Sounds like it. It sounds like when you talk about doors recognizing you, you're almost afraid that you're losing the after effects, and yet some of them are intensifying. So it may be that it may not be an all or nothing thing, that some aspects of you can sort of like afford to calibrate to the physical, while you're able to retain and even amplify other after effects.
I've wondered if it has something to do with grounding, because right after my NDE, I was not on planet Earth, really. I was more floating around up here. And now I have to ground to live life. And I wonder if grounding has something to do with that. And plus, instead of just being out here or just being grounded down, I found this way to bring both worlds together.
Mhm.
And so I wonder if that might be a little bit of an explanation for what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I've often thought that the kind of ideal condition is to have my feet on the ground and my head in the clouds. And so being able to do that, like it's important not to lift off the ground and only be in the clouds, and it's important not to be so much connected to the ground that I'm not in the clouds. And it sounds like you're finding a way to maintain that condition.
Yeah, and that was a huge learning process. I think part of the reason I had such difficulties and such resistance to integrating my after effects is because I just wanted to stay out here. It was better out there. It was more like my NDE out there. And yeah, I do think it's ideal. We're here on this planet and in our bodies for a reason. So we do need to keep some part of us connected. And
Mhm.
so finding a way to bring both of those worlds together has been a way for me to have peace. Um, my natural tendency is to float out or to tune out, or yeah, and I
Mhm.
have to work on it every day. I really
Mhm.
do.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand that. And also that the healing work that you do requires you to be connected, because the whole purpose of bringing the healing energy through you is to manifest it in physical. So yeah, so there's some importance to that.
It is important. And I found the way to do that is where I'm still in my body and I'm way more out here than I am right now. Um, but to stay grounded enough in my body, but I have to go blank. That seems to be the key. I have to go blank when I'm doing the healing work so my ego doesn't get involved or so my own stuff doesn't get involved with the work. It's an interesting dance and it's taken practice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, to make yourself, to sort of empty or clear yourself so that whatever energy needs to come through you can do that, has like a clear path.
That's exactly right. So Jane doesn't get in the way.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm. And I know that this has not been an, oh, well, before I get to that, what happened to the businesswoman that you were?
I, I tried really hard to just fake it and be the old me after my NDE. But I didn't have the passion for it. And I didn't have the drive, wasn't there. And I wasn't cutthroat at all. I was so, I feel like I was very naive after my NDE. And that doesn't really work out in the business world, especially because I was in the real estate world and the market was really bad.
Mhm.
So you had to be on top of your game business
Yeah.
wise at that
Mhm.
time. And I felt like I was too soft to do it. And when I would try to show properties, I was walking into these houses and I knew about things that had taken place there. And so I was so spaced out. I wasn't doing a good job and I didn't enjoy it anymore. And so I eventually just shut the doors for that business, not knowing what was next. But I knew that I couldn't do that anymore. And that's when I started really focusing on integrating the after effects more and more. And I was living off of savings. And I was seeing a therapist who, you know her, Jan. Um, I found her because online she had um, her dissertation was on NDEs and the after effects. And Roseanne Christian. And I hope it's okay that I said her name.
I
She's an
think
amazing part of my story. And so I went to her to figure out what I needed to do. And I remember saying to her, I sometimes I just wish I could just be a realtor again. I just want to go back to my old life. And she was writing her notes and she looked up at me, and she looked up at me over her glasses, and she goes, "You'll get sick if you do that." And I remember thinking, she's right. I mean, I would be living a lie. Or if I tried to fake it anymore, especially after I had integrated and I was starting to do so much of the healing work, if I tried to fake it and go back to that business world, I would, it would affect my physical body because I would be doing what really didn't fit at all. And so that was part of how I stepped into, I need to embrace this healing work. It made me very uncomfortable. And, but I knew that's what I really, part of the reason I came back. And so that was how I transitioned fully out of real estate, that one moment with her. And I knew she was right. And so I just completely closed the door on it at that point and really dove into the healing work. And it's just been a leap of faith, just hoping that I can make a living doing it. And it's all unfolded in beautiful and unplanned ways, but it's a complete 180 from what I was doing before.
Yeah, yeah. So when you're doing healing work, what is that like? Does that question make sense?
I think so. Well, that has changed over time too. When I first started doing the healing work, well, first I studied a lot and I had a lot of my own healing work that I needed to do. And so that that's still going on. I still have my own healer that I see. But I knew it was important work, and I knew that it was powerful, and I didn't want to hurt anyone. I wanted to be responsible about it. And so I studied a lot, and a lot of it was through the work that I was getting too, and watching these other healers and how they do everything. And so it was kind of like field training in a lot of ways. And so I first started off where I just set up a healing room in an extra bedroom of the house. And I started just working on friends. And I wasn't charging for it. I was just looking for feedback. And I was also learning to really trust my intuition at that point, and learning how to filter ego completely out of it. And I was working with my hands a lot at that point. And then I eventually got office space. And instead of a lot of hands on work, I started doing work where the client would be on the table, on the massage table, but I would be able to step back, and I could kind of start to move energy that way. Um, and at that point, I also started working at an inpatient hospice facility. And that was probably the best training ground for the healing work, because it was a 12 bed facility. And when you are in an environment like that, it's very quiet. It's very quiet. Even the medical staff is very quiet. Every room that I would walk into, I could feel that white light there. And I could feel the peacefulness of that these people were experiencing, starting to transition over. And that was a beautiful place for me to start to refine the work and to completely learn how to go blank, just observing these other beautiful souls as they were transitioning over. And a lot of times you can't touch a patient. They might be in a lot of pain or they don't want to be touched. So I was doing a lot of standoff type of healing work. And then I had my daughter. And that's when it started becoming difficult to go to the facility or to go into the office. And so I took some time off. And this was another leap of faith where I thought, I don't know what I don't know how this is all going to work out. We moved to a different state. And clients from where I used to work started calling me. And they said, we miss you. And I said, well, I'm here, thousands of miles away. I'm here and you're there. And they said, well, can't you do telephone work? And I'm like, no, I've heard of it, but I have no idea how to do that. And I was very resistant to that. But again, this started evolving and I had to just surrender to a lot of it. But I was resisting. And I was just referring them out to other healers that they could work with. But then I got a call from a friend of mine that I've known since high school. And she said, I need you to do a mediumship reading. It was for someone that she knew that really needed the healing and the help with that. And I said, there's no way, because she was in a different state. I said, there's no way. That's such a tender thing. I've never done this over the phone before. There's no way. And she said, I already told her that this would be the first time you would do this, and she's game for trying. And I said, okay, I'll try it, but I'm definitely not charging for this because this might not go well at all. It was one of the most beautiful mediumship readings. And I still keep in touch with her. And when we hung up the phone, I was blown away of how things could still come through, even though we were all these miles apart. This was a woman I had never met before. And so that's when I kind of went, oh, okay. Well, I'm open to whatever this is about. And so that's how I started doing telephone and Zoom healings and readings. And it's just, I've been doing so much reflecting back today of where I started and where I am now. It's all been just total surrender and just acceptance that I don't know. And so I'm just open to anything that's loving and good. And that's how it's all unfolded. And that's where I'm at today now.
Mm-hmm. And another aspect is kind of, again, getting Jane out of the way, that freeing yourself from your assumptions, the assumption that you have to be physically close to somebody. And then the realization, the experiential realization that consciousness and connectedness is non-local. It's not affected by physical distance. And so that belief that that everything is localized is just, you had to let go of that. Yeah.
Well, and you were one of the first ones that helped me to understand why this was possible on a scientific level, because I remember one day you and I were emailing. I think it's when you were working on your paper about spontaneous mediumship experiences. And I said something in the email of, oh, I was just thinking of you. I was going to email you today. And you wrote back and you said, that's the thing about quantum entanglement. I went, quantum entanglement. So I wrote back, I said, what is that? And you explained to me why this works,
Mm-hmm.
why we don't have to be in the same room. And so that, I still think about that email conversation. That helped a lot.
Wow, that's interesting. And so that kind of reminds me of that this process has not been easy for you. And I remember, and I know you do too, because we were talking about this right before we started this thing tonight, that this is actually my office, my home office where I used to do counseling. And Janie came to see me one day, not as a client, but for a consultation, because I'm knowledgeable about near-death experiences and after effects and things like that. And I remember at that time you were really struggling and didn't know how to deal with some of the things that were happening. So maybe you could talk about that.
That was, when I look at your office behind you, I get emotional and a little bit choked up because that meeting that you and I had was a pivotal moment. It changed everything for me. I hadn't, a big part of my struggle with integrating the after effects and kind of wrapping my head around everything that happened, I didn't really have anybody to talk to. The couple of people that I did try to talk to, they couldn't hear it and they had their reasons, and that's okay. But I didn't have a support system of people to talk to. It was all anything that I was reading online. And so I was very resistant to everything that was happening. I was very scared of everything that was happening. I was very lonely because I didn't have anyone to talk to. And I felt like I was really just kind of wandering around aimlessly. And to come and have that meeting with you in your office, that was the first time that I just let it all hang out, so to speak. I came there with the intention of, I'm not censoring myself. This is the chance. This is my chance to talk to this woman who knows about these things and is so educated. And if I can't connect with her or get some understanding from her, I'm in big trouble, was what I felt like. It felt like a last chance in a lot of ways. And you and I sat there for, I think it was several hours that we talked. And you were just talking about these subjects just like it was, to me now it's very normal. But to me at the time, I was like, how is she talking about reincarnation and, this past life and mediumship? And I was just, I needed to have a very frank conversation with someone who has done the research and does understand and is so well respected for me to I just needed that validation, I guess, um, to know that everything that I was going through was extraordinary and very different. And it was also very common at the same time, that these after effects weren't unique to me, and that there are ways to make peace with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And, I learned a lot from you as well. Um, as you know, you really brought to my awareness this phenomenon of what I've termed spontaneous mediumship. You used the phrase a little earlier, where dead people appear to you uninvited, unannounced, at all times of the day and night, and want you to convey a message to another living person. You may or may not know the dead person. You may or may not know the living person. And yet there's this request, sometimes demand, for you to convey this message. And, this was completely new to you. I had heard of it, that kind of thing happening here and there, but I'd never coalesced it into a thing. And you really helped me to do that. And now, of course, I've known and many people who have experienced it and find it so helpful to be able to have a name and a concept for what they're experiencing, not to speak of the whole process of managing it. Because like maybe you could talk about, middle of the night visits and sleeplessness and, all of that.
Um, so early on with the mediumship experiences, I wouldn't have been able to put this together at the time, but I can say now that, spirit is kind of hanging around no matter where we go. And I would go to the grocery store and, there's a couple characters hanging around there. And I thought they were for me a lot of times because they would want to try to interact because they see you as, oh, that's someone that sees me essentially. And so I was getting really confused early on about what am I supposed to do? What does all this mean? But now I understand that's just kind of life and they're around everywhere. And that doesn't mean that I have to always tune into it. But I did start to find that there were some more than others that seemed to cling to me in a way and would keep me up at night. And just, I could feel them. Even if I was able to fall asleep, I could feel them walking through the room and that would wake me up. And I was scared to death. I was so scared. And so for probably about 2 years, I slept with the light on at night. And I know that doesn't make a difference, but something about it made me feel more comfortable. And, messages and requests and demands, like you said, sometimes. And it was just annoying a lot of times. Also, I didn't know if I had a responsibility that I needed to carry out with a lot of that. As time went on, I realized that I can tune probably 90% of that out. 90% of it just isn't meant for me. And now I'm to the point where it's just, I kind of tell spirit I keep business hours. And so if the door's shut, closed, and I'll actively open myself up to receive. But it took me a long time to understand how to do that and to get to that point.
Yeah.
And it was a very scary time for me. It was very unsettling. And it's been nice now that it's being talked about more. I'll get these fantastic emails from people where they say, oh, thank you for talking about that because I've got the same thing and I thought it was just me. And it's about normalizing these after effects because it's so comforting to know that I'm not the only one who is sleeping with their lights on, and we can all help each other now that we're talking about that a little bit more. And so that's been a big deal for you to bring that out. And for me to have the freedom to say, yeah, it scared me to death and I didn't like it. But here's what I was able to do. And just to get the conversation going has been so important.
That's really great. Now, did any of these spirits ever actively do malevolent things to you or seem like they had malevolent energy or that sort of thing? Or was it more that just because they were around and you couldn't tune them out, that you were feeling like sort of controlled by it, rather like out of control? Yeah.
All of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were times where I think my fear of it made me interpret those souls as something that they probably weren't.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And my resistance and my confusion about my responsibility just really stirred up anxiety. And so I think I projected a lot of things that were mine and no one else's. There were definitely some dark energies, especially I noticed when my vibration wasn't as high, or when I was really in a big space of fear, or darkness myself. That's when I would feel the more um, pushy or malevolent types of souls, and that was scary. That was really scary. And what I know now is you can, I'm human. I still go through dark times and I'm not always vibing high. And so now I know that I could be more susceptible to that if I'm having troubles of my own. And so now I've learned about boundaries more, and how I put those boundaries up, and how I can protect my energy, and how I can really tune that out. Um, I believe that, and I think a lot of mediums would probably agree with me on this. A lot of the, a lot of them are stuck in between worlds. And this can happen, I've noticed, with tragic, unexpected passings. Some people will just pop right out and go right into the light and they're good to go. Other times, I think people who are really attached, have a really big attachment to the physical world, might have a resistance to passing over, or their belief system, maybe they think they don't deserve the love of the light. So they might be a little stuck in between. And I'm I can say with really almost 100% certainty that I think that's what's going on when there's something that feels scary happening with spirit or with the soul.
Mhm, mhm. That it's really a soul that in some way is in distress and needs help of some kind. Yeah.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
Imagine being stuck in between worlds. That
Yeah.
nothing about that sounds fun. And so
Yeah.
it's like you're not in the physical, but you haven't passed over. So you're just, that would be distressing.
Yeah.
And yeah, and they just need a little bit of help. And I think sometimes too, if it was a really quick passing, I think sometimes they don't always know that they're dead.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. And so I've heard some people say that they sometimes help uh, souls like this by gently conveying to them that that you are dead, and to look for the light, and to that if they um, would like to move on, that they can, sort of thing. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it almost sounds too simple, but that's what works. And so if I have a sense um, of, a soul hanging around, I'll just tune in, and I'll just tune in and feel like, are you stuck? Are you in between worlds? Do you need help passing over? What do you need? And sometimes it's a question of, do you know you're dead? Do you know? Because you are. And sometimes that's all they need to hear. It's very matter of fact. And also, sometimes there's a little bit of trauma that they still need to heal. And so, just surrounding them with that healing light so they can have whatever type of peace that they need to be able to pass over. So it
Mhm.
might take a little while,
Mhm.
um, because of whatever they've experienced in their life that keeps them from just transitioning really quickly.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow. So what have we not touched on yet that feels important to you to say?
Um, well, I guess I wanted to say that the reason DFW meeting is so important to me is because it was the first place I showed up of like, this is my last chance. This is a last resort. And, I think people think that when you have an NDE that life becomes perfect or you don't struggle after that. And I think it's important for people to hear that it's not all roses after you have an NDE and there can be struggle. And so IANDS in particular and meetings like this, I wish I had found sooner so I didn't have to struggle alone as much as I did. And when I look back on where I was that first time I met with you in your office compared to where I am now, it's a 180. It's a completely different life. And it's a life that's true to what I'm doing. And there's a lot of joy and fulfillment because I do feel lined up with my soul's purpose. But I do think it's important to know that if you're struggling, if you've had an NDE or you've had any type of big life change, it doesn't have to be that you flatlined in the hospital. Any big transformation, that there is struggle and there are a lot of tools out there to seek and to figure out what works for you. Because my big thing is if I can help it, I don't want anybody else to have to hurt as much as I did for a couple years after my NDE.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And the way that I kind of conceptualize it is that our culture doesn't prepare us for the reality of the transpersonal domain. And things operate there differently than they operate in the physical world. And so it's a shock to the system to suddenly be exposed to this whole other thing with a whole other operating system, so to speak, and really have no resources to understand it, to integrate it. And so I think that is an important role that IANDS has played to connect people who do have an understanding of this, because there is a lot of that recognition when NDEers meet each other and start talking about their after effects. It's like, oh, that, yes, and a big one is, you mentioned the electromagnetic, how your watches don't work and the automatic doors wouldn't. I don't know if you've had anything with lights or televisions or other things kind of malfunctioning. And that we know from research now that if a person is more emotionally aroused, and it doesn't matter whether it's like anger or joy, but that emotional arousal, that energetic intensity seems to intensify the electromagnetic effects too. And so just like you were talking about realizing that when your energy is low, you seem to attract or leave the door open to lower energy entities. And that, part of the answer is to, as much as possible, genuinely maintain your energy level and identify things that are pulling you down and resolve them so that you can be higher. The same thing is true specifically with the electromagnetic things about, if things start going kaflooey around you, to center and calm and that sort of thing. And that tends to calm down the electromagnetic things as well. So, learning all those kinds of things, it's like people don't talk about this in real estate, or even the world of medicine, or even the world of counseling. But it's very real for a lot of people to deal with stuff like this. Yeah.
And I'm still learning so much. Now I know, center up. There have been times like Trisha Barker, who's an NDEer that a lot of people have heard of. She interviewed me for her YouTube channel, and we laughed. We had to try 3 times on 3 separate occasions before we could get it to work, because you get 2 NDEers trying to work with Wi-Fi and Zoom. Things can really get out of control, and we had to laugh about it, because we just kind of knew this might flop now and it might flop next time, but hopefully the internet gods will work with us next time. But to center up makes total sense. Now I know. Thank you.
Yeah. Set it
Um,
up.
We
Yeah.
have in the chat column here, we have a number of questions, and I also was thinking about allowing people just to unmute their mics if they wanted to ask questions. What do you think about that?
Sure. Or raise your hand if you'd like to actually ask your question, or otherwise
Okay.
then if we don't see hands, then Pete, do you want to translate some of the questions?
Sure. Now,
Okay.
some of these go back earlier in the presentation, so they'll refer to things that were talked about then.
Yeah, that's
But I'll
fine.
just take them in the order that we have here. And the first one says that in your NDE story, you said that there was an experience of, no, don't send me back. And the question about that was that because you were unhappy in your life before, or was it because the feeling of love there was just so strong?
It was because the feeling of love there was so strong. That's to experience something like that, you never want to leave. I still go back, and it's always on the forefront of my mind, because it was such a powerful love, and I just never wanted to leave it. It's like if you could think of being in the most perfect place and then being told you had to leave, you wouldn't want to. And it's because it was such pure love. That's the reason why.
So before you go on, Pete, that brings up another question to me. So what's, I am going to guess, and I could be wrong about this. Don't want to put words in your mouth, that I certainly have come to believe that is all of us came from there, and we'll go back to there, and that we apparently choose to come to physical existence to kind of leave that. And what's your theory about first of all, do you agree with all that? And if so, why do you think we ever would choose to leave it?
I do agree with all of that. And I think that's source, or where we all did come from. And we all have that light at our, it's at our core of who we are. Which is sometimes hard to believe for, people are doing certain things that aren't kind at all. And it's, I even believe at their core that they're light, just something is happening that we don't have the big picture explanation of. I think the reason we come here is to learn, and to love. And I think each of our souls has, it's almost like school that we need to go through, or these different lessons that we need to learn that we couldn't learn otherwise. We need the challenges of the physical world, to be able to learn those things, and to be able to consistently, hopefully, return back to love over and over again. And even as I say that, there's this human part of me that says, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why do we have to do all of that? I don't when I was on the other side, I did have a 360-degree perspective, and I retain a lot of that now, but I'm also still limited by my body and my brain and vocabulary. And so I can't really eloquently explain why I think we're here to learn. I know without a doubt that that's what we're here to do, and to love, and to just consistently come back to love.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, Pete.
Well, there's another question. This seems almost like a question about some of the details of the technicalities. Um, you were talking about communicating with a voice that can't be heard. And in that communication, how about your voice? Did you hear your voice, or was it a silent experience? What was that? What was
That's
that
a
like?
good question. Nobody's ever asked me that question before. I didn't have a voice, but I thought I had a voice. That doesn't, try to make some sense out of that. I was communicating, and it was the word no, and I felt like I could feel my head shaking no, even though I didn't have a body. So somehow I was communicating that I didn't want to go, but I don't remember hearing my own voice saying no, if that
So
makes sense.
some NDEers have talked about mind to mind or thought to thought communication, that it was that the thought was there and it being expressed got communicated. Like, I don't know.
Yes, that's it exactly. You nailed it. It was mind to mind, and maybe for me to describe it as saying no, that's my human way of describing it, because how do you really explain that mind to mind communication? It's
Yeah.
abstract.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay.
You talked earlier about learning how to ground yourself. And we have a question wanting to know, how do you do that?
Grounding, I've noticed that depending on the day, depending on how out of my body and in the clouds I am, I have to take more drastic measures to ground. But I've found really quick, easy ways to ground. And one of the main ones is just go out in nature. And that's one of my favorite ones, because if you can go walk through the park or go for a hike, it's very grounding. It brings you into your body, and you're also still in the clouds a little bit because you're out in nature. And that's my favorite one for grounding, because I get to experience both worlds that way. If I'm really having trouble getting in, I do different meditations where I will notice my energy flowing down through the bottom of my feet into the earth, and um, roots growing out of the soles of my feet into the earth. Or sometimes I'll bring the energy of, um, that earth energy up into me, and then I'll ground back down into it. Um, I have different meditations that I like to listen to for that. But what I found is it needs to be a little bit more of a daily practice, so I don't let it get too out of control. And so I do a little something every day, whether that's going out into nature, or, a lot of times if you just, you know, rub your body, that'll ground you into your body. Um, I have a little girl, and being around kids is one of the best ways to ground, because they have a lot of questions, and they're not going to settle for you being out in Never Land or floating around in space. They want you to focus on them and play or answer questions. And so being around kids, I think, is one of the best ways to ground. Gardening, playing in the dirt, getting your hands dirty, getting your feet dirty is a great way to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, and then there's one other one I wanted to mention that I'm feeling coming up is there are different sound healings that you can get that are tuned for grounding. Or I find Gregorian chant very relaxing, and there's a lot of low tones in that type of sound healing. And so any type of sound with low tones is really great for grounding, especially if you're too tired to do any of those other things that I mentioned, because I know there are days like that too.
It's a more passive way to be
Right.
able to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good way to say it.
Well, thank you for that. Now, the next one, I think one of the most common after effects of an NDE, commonly reported, is the loss of the fear of death. There's a question that asks, regarding the loss of the fear of death after your NDE, when you're facing if you've ever found yourself in a risky or dangerous situation, can you talk about fear of death and those kinds of situations?
Sure. I have no fear of death, of the actual passing out of my body. I feel like I know what to expect,
Mhm.
and I'm looking forward to it whenever it's my time. So I don't have any fear of death itself. Where I do sometimes get a little fearful is, how will I die? I hope there's not a lot of suffering involved. So that's where fear will come in. But even with working with hospice patients, I know, because I've seen tremendous suffering right before people pass, they even still have a peace about them.
Hmm.
And I always think back on that when I start to freak out thinking about how I might die. Um, but I haven't found myself in a life-threatening situation since my NDE. So I don't know exactly how I would feel or how I would react. But I think even if I started feeling fearful, I would always just consistently remind myself, you know what it'll be like. And if there's suffering, it's just going to be a blip on the radar compared to what's waiting for me.
The next question is, you talked about the experience of having your holes and damage filled, healing, the healing experience, both spiritual and physical healing. And were you able, coming back into this life, to bring that? Were you healed on your return, essentially? Did you come back as a healed person?
Not completely healed, no. I don't know that that ever is a done deal. I'm still healing, and I think that's the case. I think most NDEers would tell you they're still healing too. It was almost like a jump start, is what it felt like. I had a lot of childhood trauma that I had gone to therapy for. So I had talked about it a lot, but the wounds were still there energetically. And I think that I really needed to feel love. And so having those wounds healed and feeling that love, it was like it gave me the confidence to continue with healing work. And also, it gave me hope to know that it's possible to experience healing. So I would describe it as a really powerful jump start. And now, any healing that I'm doing is kind of smoothing out the rough edges at this point. But it was a big healing, but it was not a complete healing. There was still more to be done.
Thanks.
We have another question that's talked about, when you were in the hospital, did the doctors ever tell you that you actually flatlined?
Yeah, that happened. And I remember, I had follow-up surgeries too. And I remember trying to talk to my surgeon about it, and he sidestepped it a lot. And so I ended up ordering my medical records because I wanted to understand what really happened. But yeah, there was a definite flatline. And I don't remember the exact amount of time, but yes, that did happen.
They were reluctant to share that information with you.
Not reluctant to share that information, but I felt like they wanted to gloss it over. I think there was, they let me stay sick for a long time before they were able to diagnose. And so I don't know if there was any malpractice or negligence there, but I think that was part of why there was what felt like a lot of glossing over of like, oh no, let's sweep that under the rug. You're fine now. And also they didn't want to talk about near-death experiences and going into the light. That was way too woo-woo talk for my surgeon that I was seeing.
The next question is it's a big step away from what we've been talking about, where someone has asked, and it's about animals and small children. So that may be just a whole subject matter in itself. But did you notice them smiling or nudging or acknowledging you in any way that you picked up on and that you perhaps weren't able to respond to completely, or just the whole subject of a new level of communication with animals and small children?
After my NDE, how did that change? It
Yes.
sounds like, okay.
Yes. Yes.
I remember especially right after my NDE, I remember kids looking at me like I was Santa Claus. I had never seen kids look at me that way. And I wasn't a mom at that point, so I wasn't especially good at interacting with kids. But I just remember they would just look at me and their eyes would light up and they'd be drawn to me and they'd want to get closer to me and they'd want to touch me. And so I distinctly remember that about kids, and they are still that way, but it's changed some where now kids just want to sit really close to me. I think they can, on some level, feel that calm and that healing from the light. And so they just want to be next to me. And I think it's calming and soothing for them. So I don't have quite this Santa Claus effect anymore, but I think they feel like they're experiencing healing when they're close to me. With animals, I don't know. I've never really thought about that. I had two dogs who have since passed, but I'm trying to think if they acted any different around me. They may have been a little more protective of me. They knew that I was going through some stuff. But other animals, I don't think so. But I do feel like I have a deeper understanding, definitely of kids, especially kids that are spiritually gifted, and they seem to gravitate toward me almost like a kindred spirit type of feeling. But animals, I feel them more, but I don't know that my relationship with animals has changed very much. I know I don't want to eat meat.
Mm.
That gets to me now. It never used to.
That's interesting about children. And of course you've since become a mom, so you've had a lot of that. This is a really good question that wait, yeah. The next one, simple, but did your religious or spiritual beliefs change after your NDE?
Yeah. So my religious beliefs prior to my NDE were very they were Christian beliefs. I was not going to church and I wasn't living that type of life, but that was my belief system. And I really struggled right after my NDE, and I still struggle with this a little bit of I didn't see Jesus during my NDE. And I remember this was, the first 6 months after my NDE, this is my big question, was I knew I had gone to heaven, but I didn't see Jesus there and I didn't see God there or what I thought God would be. And it was like, the question that I was just constantly rolling around in my mind was, did I make it to heaven because those were my beliefs? Or does heaven have nothing to do with that? And so that's been a big challenge for me, with integrating all of that, because now my beliefs are much more broad. I think it's Ram Dass who said we're all just walking each other home. And I believe that with all of my heart. And so I'm deeply spiritual. But I wouldn't say I'm this religion or that religion. I'm very interested and curious about all different types of people's spiritual practices and religious beliefs. I think we have a lot to learn from each other. And so it changed in that way where I'm constantly questioning and wondering, and I'm constantly evolving in that area too, because I do believe in Jesus. And um, it's just everything got more broad after I had my NDE.
The next question is, what about your close family members? And I'm thinking that specifically, how has your relationship developed during and after, and also, with regard to the after effects and the NDE itself?
It has caused more separation than togetherness, unfortunately. Um, there's there are very few people in my family that I've been able to talk to about this. Um, and because of that, there's a natural separation that takes place and a lot of growing apart and a lot of agreeing to disagree.
Mhm.
That has come up a lot, but it's hard when this is such a huge part of my life to not, it's very difficult to have a close relationship with someone who can't at least be interested in a big part of your life. And so it's been very challenging with family members. And it's been tough. It's been really tough. I've been very fortunate to make new friends, and I've got my NDE family. But there still is that sadness around some of the loss of other relationships. But having an NDE definitely does change those dynamics. And hopefully you can kind of figure out the dance and come together in a new way. But I haven't had much success with that, unfortunately.
How about with your daughter?
Oh, well, yeah, that's a different story because she's only ever known me this way. She didn't know me pre-NDE, and plus I'm mom. So that's a different type of connection. Um, I think it connects she and I on an even deeper level because I really can tune into her and I'm not afraid of feelings and emotions. And so none of her emotions are too big for me to hold space for. And I think that has made me a better mom. Um, so she can process just being a kid around me and she can ask me the hard questions. And she's at an age right now where she's trying to understand what death is. So, is it permanent? What does that mean? And so she's got a lot of questions that I think a lot of parents would not want to go there. And I'm just like, yeah, let's sit down and let's chat about that. And so it has definitely deepened our relationship. And for that, I'm so grateful for.
Well, it'll be interesting to watch her grow, under having had this experience as a young kid. Um, I also know that you've created a website and you have something called White Light Solutions, and I was hoping you'd talk a little bit about what went into the creation of that, why you did it, and and talk about that a little bit.
My big focus is, like I was saying earlier, to help people. So hopefully you don't have to struggle as much as I did. And I needed guidance, and I needed healing work, and I needed clearing work and grounding work and all of those things. And at first I didn't know where to get it, but I eventually met healers and people that were helping me. But the thing that was missing and why I wanted to create White Light Solution is because, these spiritual needs or these healing needs, they often arise at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. And even if you have a great network of people that you can talk to, who do you call at 2 a.m.? Especially if it feels like, a lot of anxiety or an immediate need that you have, or to just feel like you're not alone, someone to normalize it for you. And so I made White Light Solution. It's healings by topic, but it also includes video teachings where, like one topic is know your soul's purpose. So first I do a video teaching where I give tips on intuition and how to know what your path might look like. And then I do a guided healing specific to the topic that clears you in a way and grounds you in a way that will line you up with what you're trying to accomplish. And I have to be honest that I didn't know if it was possible to infuse a recording with white light. That sounded almost as impossible to me as doing a reading over the phone. And so it took me a while to do this because I needed to know that it was actually going to be healing and helpful for people. And so I started doing the recordings. I had friends listen to them. I had some clients who were regular clients listen to them. And I didn't even tell them anything about it. I just said, will you just listen to this and tell me if it does anything for you? And people were saying they were getting profound healings. And so that's how I knew that it worked. And another thing was, I know when, even now, sometimes, it can be expensive to see a healer. And so sometimes you need something that's affordable but effective. And so I needed to make the program that as well. So it was important to have it 24/7 and cheap. And so I put all these recordings together, and it was a leap of faith too, and just trust and surrender. And so now I've got 14 of them available through White Light Solution, and it's been out for a little over, I started doing them a little over a year ago, and people say they're kind of addicted to them because they feel the white light coming through and they feel all the qualities of the white light coming through. And it just helps you to sleep better and to release anxiety. And so that's what White Light Solution is. And that's the reason it was important for me to put it together, because it was a missing resource that people really need to have available to them if it feels right to them.
Knowing that this video is going to be publicly available without restriction, do you want to mention the name of your website?
Sure. It's safehandshealing.com. And there's a lot of information on there. But if you want to look at White Light Solution, there's a special tab just for that where you can learn more about what it's about, and you'll see all of the healings there. And then I've got other information on there too. A freebie PDF for spirit signs, how you can recognize some of the common ways that spirit or loved ones try to connect. And I talk about manifestation and all of those different things. And any of the interviews I've done, I also post them on there as well, so you can see them all in one place.
Well, you can probably get a link to this recording then as well. There is one more question in the chat box, but I'm going to ask mine first, which is, are you going to write a book?
Well, everybody keeps asking me that, which is making me wonder, is it time? Maybe, I don't know. really, really wanted to write a book before. And having a young child, things get busy. It's hard to sit at the computer for hours and write. So I don't know, maybe it's time. I'm open to it. If the path kind of clears or opens up, I'm very open to it and ready to do it. And I have some ideas of how I would like to do it. So maybe, probably.
It sounds like it's an idea that's cooking a little bit. So
It's
we'll
cooking.
wait. We'll be excited to hear if there is one. The last question that we have on the chat box here is, um, put on your mediumship hat here. Do you feel any spirit wanting to give anyone in the audience a message or confirmation
Oh,
that they're
I didn't
prayers?
come prepared for that.
Mm.
And usually I do have a little process that I go through for that. Um, I guess I don't feel prepared for that. Yeah, so I don't want to force it because like I said earlier, when this is happening, um, yeah, I don't feel prepared for that. Maybe next time.
Right. No. So that brings up a really good question is, if you were to prepare for that, what would that process be like?
That's that going blank process. That's why I don't want to force it because I haven't gone blank. I'm too much Jane right now. And so I feel like anything that would come through, it would almost be irresponsible for me to try um to decipher what's coming through because I'm just way too much Jane right now. So before I do any type of mediumship reading or really any type of healing, I go blank and I just take a little bit of quiet time and I get my body into a comfortable position and I raise my vibration. I get into that place of love and I shed as much ego as possible, clear my channels, and then see what pops in.
Great answer. I've never heard anyone actually describe that process before.
Mhm.
So, um,
I have heard other mediums specifically talk about raising their vibration, raising their energetic level, almost like when we leave our bodies, our vibration raises. And so spirit is functioning at like a higher vibration and embodiment is a lower. And in order to meet them or kind of get to the same level where there can be communication, we have to raise our vibration. And so so that part I have heard before. Yeah.
And plus, it has a lot to do with who or what you want to attract in. What type of a reading do you want to have? And if I'm having a bad day, I really need to put some extra effort into raising my vibration. So it's a healing reading and a helpful reading.
it sounds like it's not something to be taken lightly.
No, I don't take it lightly. I think that it's be the most important hour of a person's life. And that is not something that you mess around with. And so I take it very seriously. And that's anybody who's ever listened to my story knows I'm a reluctant medium, to put it lightly. And I think that's why, because that's a big deal. And I have found that the readings that I do that are for people that really, the goal is healing, whether it's that they really miss someone and they want to connect and feel them, or if it was a strained relationship and they really want to try to heal that or get some closure around that or forgiveness even around that. Those are beautiful, beautiful readings. And to be a part of, because I'm the middleman, to be a part of something like that is incredible. What I found, and a big part of my being a reluctant medium, is I think because mediumship has become more mainstream. There's a lot of times people will come and they'll just, it's very much this feeling of, okay, so shock me, amaze me, surprise me. And it's not for healing. And I would say that happens 50% of the time. And that makes it really hard for me, because of the type of work that I want to do. And it's a big part of my reluctance. And it's because I do take it so seriously. So I purposely now will only do a certain number of mediumship readings per week. And then the rest is all straight healing. Because when it was all mediumship, I could have a full week of people who just wanted to be shocked and amazed. And that really, it was like it chipped away at me. And so maybe I take it too seriously. I don't know, but it's very important to me to be very sensitive about that.
Well, Jan, you might speak to this, but there is a popular understanding of mediumship that it's perhaps some form of entertainment value, and that to you, Jane, it sounds like you're saying that feels like a misuse of the ability in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's and I understand why people are interested in that, but that's not the reason I do it. I'm a healer. I'm not an entertainer. And it's I think it's because it's on TV. And I think that those TV shows are great because it has made it more mainstream or more acceptable. But you're looking at what was a 60 or 90-minute reading that's getting edited down to a few minutes. And those are the aha moments. And I think that's great. My favorite readings are the ones where there are a lot of tears, healing tears, and just closeness and connection. And because that's healing, that's healing. And that's what I like to do, is the healing work.
Yeah.
I do think that even when people are seeking quote unquote entertainment, I think that at some level they're seeking confirmation of the nature of consciousness surviving death, and the eternal connectedness that we have and all that, but they may not have an immediate something that needs to be healed like immediately. It's more like they're that they want the reminder of
Right.
who we really are. And in that way, I think even that is healing, but it's not as as like urgent, or that's not the right word, as the kind of healing you're talking about, where there's really something, that the person is suffering, and that you're able to help alleviate some of their suffering. Yeah.
Right. And that's a wonderful point, Jan, that there is healing, even if it's just for entertainment value. You don't make an appointment and go see a medium if there's not some part of you that's maybe seeking or searching or looking for some type of validation, that there's more than just this. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right that there's value to that as well.
Yeah, some. But I also understand that it's not as I just can't find the right word, as like urgent, as in cases where people are acutely suffering in some way, and you can really be of help to them that way. Yeah, that's important, especially because the process takes it takes your energy. You don't have endless energy. And so you probably want to put your energy where it can do the most good. And yeah, and so, yeah, when people are acutely suffering, there's more potential good there. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
those readings are different too, because it's not just communication with their loved one. You tend to go deeper into, healing trauma or healing emotions. And so it's got some different layers to it as well. When there's that suffering piece involved, they're really looking for that deep release and healing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Neat.
I was going to say we have a few minutes left, so if you do have a question, we still have time to entertain it. In the meantime, I do have two comments here that I'm going to read to you. One says, I'm a member of Jane's White Light Solution. She says it's a wonderful group, and I'm grateful to her for her guided healings. It's helped me greatly. And another comment on the subject we were just on says, thank you for being so honest. I need to make an appointment with you because I need the healing you're able to give. I'm crying right now, she says.
Oh,
Do not want to be
I'm
entertained.
sending you love right now.
I need healing for sure. Relief of suffering is what I need so much. Thank you for your honesty. So.
And I noticed, Stephen, you had your hand up before and then took it down. I didn't know if you wanted to jump in now with a question or, because we're happy to take questions directly from you as well. You don't have to use the chat. Anybody? So you're muted. Yeah. So let's see if we can unmute you.
Who are we looking at?
Stephen Henderson, but it's really a woman, right?
Okay, asked to unmute. Let's see.
I'm
There we go.
sorry,
Unmute.
it's Renee, and my question has already been asked.
Okay, thanks, Renee.
I was going to add, I was going to explain it, but Pete did a really good job of clarifying what my question was.
Great.
So yes, I am on Stephen's iPad. So.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
And hi, Jane.
Hi.
And Christine has her hand up. And so we need to unmute her.
Yes, hi.
Hi, Christine.
I guess I'll turn on my video for a minute.
There you are. Hi.
This is wonderful. I'm very much in agreement and with what has been shared, and I have a great desire to learn more about it and grow my spiritual anyway. So I said that because I find this very interesting. It's almost a little bit of a comment, and I would love to get your take on this. What I had just probably 10 minutes ago tried to log on to your website, and my browser would not let me because it was telling me that it was a dangerous site. And I just found that so interesting because well, I want to hear your take, but there could, those forces, I mean, and that it won't keep me away from your site, if you know what I'm saying, Jane. So I would just love to get your take on that happening.
I would just say it's not the right time. Don't force it. Yeah, maybe it's not the right time for you to look at my website. So, but if it's still coming up for you, follow that intuitive nudge, and maybe in 2 days you'll get exactly what you're supposed to need from it. But yeah, I wonder too about that, of different signs and things like that. And now I'm thinking, is something going on with my website? Do I need to look at the technology of it? But that's ultimately what I would fall back on, is it just wasn't the right time. So maybe later, if you're still feeling it.
Okay, thank you.
Interesting. Yeah, it's not always clear whether something is happening in the material world or whether there's something spiritual involved. And yeah.
This was a big part of my struggle early on after my NDE. I used to think everything was a sign, everything. And I made myself crazy And then once I realized that sometimes it's just life, that lightened things up for me a lot. So I look more for synchronicities now, where if something feels like a sign, I'll kind of take note of it. But then if it keeps happening and that synchronicity's there, then it's got my attention.
So like once could be an accident, but 3 times is a pattern, and that makes, yeah, deserves your attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so we have just a couple minutes left. If anyone else has any other question or comment. And is there anything else, Jane, that comes to you to say?
You and I had talked a little bit about this before everybody else came on, about why people have been wondering or have been commenting, why are NDEers, why do they seem so calm?
Right.
I hear that, and I see that a lot of people will say, why is she so calm? And it's not just me, it's everybody else. Or why do I feel so calm when I listen to people talk about their NDE? And I think it's a couple different reasons. I think when I'm talking about my NDE, you're feeling the white light right along with me. I mean, chances are if you're here, you're a sensitive soul too. So you can pick up on things and feel things. And when I'm talking about what happened, I'm feeling what happened. And I think you pick up on that peace and calmness as well. And also, I think that NDEers, we have something that we carry in our core, where even if our personal lives are chaotic, or the world around us is chaotic, we still carry that experience with us, with the absolute knowledge that everything is okay and everything is going to be okay. And it's an inner peace, I think, that people feel when they say that. And so I think it seems to be a question a lot. So that's why I wanted to address the reason I think it's that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very nice feeling to share that sense of calm, and that sense that at a deep level, all is well. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. A certainty that all is well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to remind everyone that this will be available on our YouTube channel. It'll be about, well, something less than 2 hours, I'm guessing. So if you wanted to review it, listen to it again, I'll be sending a link out as soon as we get it up there. And I want to thank you, Jane, for volunteering to do this. I know you've presented at the conference before, and you've done a lot of interviews now, but for you to come and share with us like this is really special.
Yeah.
And I think this is gonna reach a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How many people did you say are on our YouTube channel now? Followers?
We
People?
have almost 1,000 followers now, and we only have one video up, and it's been up for about 4 months, and it's gotten about 55,000 views so far. So it's we're getting a little bit of exposure here, and I think that's a great way for this message to take its place out there. So
Yeah. So thank you, Jane.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This is really special. I'm going to cry now. This is really special for me.
Yeah. For me too. Yeah. So
and thank
wonderful.
you to everyone for joining us tonight. We
Yes.
had a nice crowd.
We did. And
Yeah.
next, we commented before, and I'll say again that next month is Dr. Cummings, right, Pete?
Yes.
Yeah. And he is a physician who had a near-death experience. He also went through a couple of years of turmoil because his experience was in such contradiction with all of his previous worldview. And but now he's got it together. and he's ready to speak publicly. And was very much a materialist philosophically previously, and of course now is not. And his NDE occurred during a whitewater rafting accident where he was caught in a whirlpool underwater. So I hope we'll see you again next month. And it was nice to see many of your familiar faces and many of your familiar names. So
Good night,
okay.
everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Right.
Good night, Jane.
Bye. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.